Through a series of presentations, you're about to hear from a group of creatives who have navigated the challenges of the pandemic in their own country with ingenuity and purpose. We will hear how the pandemic affected their practices and shaped their creative output. To tell their stories, please welcome the first two presenters. Going first is منار الهنائي, co-founder and storyteller-in-chief of Sikka magazine and creative platform. She will then be followed by Sharifa الهنائي, co-founder and director of the Khaleeji Art Museum. Please welcome them to the stage.
Good afternoon, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here. Sikka is an Arabic word that translates to a pathway that connects neighborhoods together. Founded in 2017 by my sister Sharifa and I, Sikka is a magazine and an integrated creative platform that is focused on arts, culture, opinions, and literatures from the Arab world, with a focus on the Arab Gulf states. We aim for Sikka to be the Sikka that connects international readers to our region. As journalists and writers, having published our works in international media, we saw a gap in the international media sphere where there weren't as many Arab writers or writers from the region who were writing about topics that not necessarily revolved, or not only revolved around politics, business, religion, and the likes. We saw a gap for writers who would talk about arts, culture, about the stories that are important to us, the stories that make our region beautiful. And so we followed Gandhi's advice, and we decided to be the change that we wanted to see in the world. We started off as a digital magazine and platform because we felt that that was the fastest way to reach international readers around the world. That meant we embraced remote working before COVID made it the norm. We work with creatives from the region, and we help empower and encourage them to think of digital media as a field of work. And this empowerment, this encouragement is the core of what we do at Sikka. When the COVID-19 pandemic hit, we as many players in the creative industry were impacted. A lot of the projects we were supposed to initiate, to launch during the pandemic were put to a halt. But thankfully, on the other side, because a lot of people were staying at home, we saw a spike in the number of readerships. We saw that the number of our followers increased dramatically. And as a result of that, we were able to still go ahead with some of the projects we had with entities. We were still able to secure some sponsorship, and our business was not affected. But we were aware of the negative impacts that the pandemic had on our friends in our network, our creative friends, and we decided to do something about it at Sikka. We decided to channel all of our energy, all of our efforts to supporting the creative economy in the Arab world. And so we've decided to dedicate all of the three issues of last year to the creative economy, to shed a light on the arts and culture practitioners from the region. We also dedicated our Instagram pages to shed the light on the photographers, the artists, and the creatives from the region. And as a result of that, our creative network expanded and our followers multiplied dramatically. We also launched, because a lot of the students were staying at home during COVID, they're working from home, they recently graduated, we launched our biggest remote internship program to date, where we helped equip a lot of the fresh graduates or students who are about to graduate with the necessary skills that would help them venture into journalism or into media in the future. Also, with more people staying at home and logging into Zoom talks and being part of the online events became the norm, we launched Sikka Talks. It was a series of webinars where we featured or we hosted a number of people who are some of the thought leaders, from the Arab world who shared their thoughts on arts and culture. As a result of all of that, we reached a wider global audience, more than we had anticipated. Our audience appreciated the fresh perspectives that we brought in. They appreciated the insights that we presented into one of the most important and misunderstood regions in the world. And as a result of that, we have opened our new Sikka HQ in London at the end of last year to help serve that growing international market. We also partnered with Art and Object, a fine arts website from the United States. We have a partnership with them where we publish each of our others' contents so that they can tap into the market in the Arab world and we tap into the market in the United States. The pandemic presented many challenges to businesses across the board, but we at Sikka strongly believe that only by supporting each other, we'd be able to go through our darkest hours and even grow in spite of it. We are very grateful that we were able to support many of the creatives in the Arab region through the pandemic, and we are extremely grateful for the support that they have provided to us as well. Thank you so much.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Sharifa bint Mohammed bin Talib الهنائي, and I'm the co-founder and director of the Khaleejiyya Art Museum. It's a pleasure to be speaking with all of you today. Oops. Sorry, I have to navigate this clicker. So I'd like to start us off with a little anecdote. Every art lover and enthusiast out there has a unique story of how they first began to appreciate, understand, and truly love art. Mine began with the following painting, which many of you may recognize. It was 2015, and I was going through a personally challenging time, and I decided, along with a cousin of mine, to visit Vienna, Austria for our winter break to relieve some of the stress that I was feeling. And it was during our stay in Vienna that we visited the Albertina Museum, where coincidentally they had a huge exhibition of Norwegian artist Edvard Munch's work. We decided to visit the exhibition not because we were particularly fans of art ourselves, but because we saw his most famous painting, perhaps, the scream on the promotional poster of the exhibition. But little did I know that that day, I would leave the exhibition with one part of my life truly altered forever. The painting launched me into this kind of obsessive journey into finding art that resembled me, because for the very first time in my life, this painting made me stop and reflect and truly pause after I had gone years in my younger life just passing by art in museums and galleries that I had been visiting. And I think the reason for that is because I saw parts of myself in that painting at the time. To me, at least, the person in the painting seems to be carrying the burdens of the world, which was exactly what I was feeling at that particular chapter in my life. And so after that day, I began to discover art that resembled me or moved me in some way, shape, or form. I began to familiarize myself with the work of artists such as Edward Hopper or Vincent van Gogh, and I soon found myself familiarizing myself and venturing into the world of Khaliji art, or the art of the Arab Gulf states. And one of the first artists whose work I became familiar with was actually Ali al-Farsi, a Omani artist from Oman. She painted this magnificent painting during the COVID-19 pandemic. I urge you to check out her work if you don't know her already. I also got to know Saudi artist Taghreed al-Bakshi, whose work often depicts the changes that are occurring in Saudi society. And what really pulled me towards Khaliji art is not only because it depicted universal experiences the way that Van Gogh does, or the way that Hopper does, or Monk does, but also because I could see my people, the people of the region, and our rich culture depicted in these artworks. And afterwards, I began to get to know many of the artists and photographers of the region. I began to find myself not wanting to miss any art event or any opening of an exhibition or gallery that was happening. And I found myself collecting Khaliji art. But then, of course, the COVID-19 pandemic hit. And many museums and art institutions in the region and beyond it were forced to shutter their doors to in-person visitors. And it soon became very clear to every one of us who loves art that many of these institutions were actually unprepared or unwilling to engage in a world where there wasn't physical presence anymore. And so for many of us art lovers and art enthusiasts out there, this time was particularly challenging in that respect, because we couldn't go to the exhibitions and the institutions and the museums that we loved so much and see the art that we love so much as well. And so we decided in the midst of the pandemic, my co-founder and I, to launch a new venture, which is the Khaliji Art Museum, to sort of fill that gap that had occurred. The Khaliji Art Museum, as you can see here, this is a mobile view of the Khaliji Art Museum. It's supposed to be a video, but it doesn't seem to be working. The Khaliji Art Museum is the first digital museum that is dedicated to art of the Arab Gulf states. And we showcase the work of artists and photographers who work with modern and contemporary art and who are based and are from the region. And we showcase their work with a global audience through our digital museum. And one of the first exhibitions that we held was Khalijis in the time of Corona, which basically showcased the work of 16 artists and photographers from the region whose work was inspired by the pandemic in some way, shape, or form. This is the work of a Saudi art photographer and artist called Tamer Abdullah. And we were very pleasantly surprised that so many people visited the online exhibition, more than 10,000 in the first month. And that really proved to us that contrary to what people believed before the pandemic in particular, people were willing to visit online art events, and artists and photographers were willing to showcase their work in such exhibitions and events. And ever since then, we've held a few more group and solo exhibitions. We've showcased the work of young and emerging artists such as Maryam Al-Amin from Bahrain, this is her artwork, and Omani photographer Mahmoud Al-Zajali. And we're very excited to be revealing our programming very soon. What's also worthy to mention here, very quickly before I conclude, I know my time is up, is that in February of this year, we started a collaboration with Dubai Festival City, through which we showcase Khaliji art on an Imagine screen that is 37 stories high. And we really started this collaboration because we wanted to present Khaliji art in a new and innovative way, and we wanted to present it in a way that really demanded attention to it, because I do believe it is Khaliji art is underappreciated not only globally, but also within our region. And what better way to command attention to something than to make it larger than life as we have. And what was also important to us is that we showcase this art in a very safe way. So as you can see from the picture, this art show in Dubai Festival City took place outside, so people could really sit wherever they wanted and have a good time and be safe. And we're proud that thousands of people have safely seen these shows that we've put together ever since February, and we're excited to reveal our programming soon. To conclude, the COVID-19 pandemic has been disastrous on humanity in so many respects, but at the same time, it has unleashed our creativity, and it has pushed us to think beyond the limits and beyond the familiar. And this is something that we must acknowledge that the pandemic gave us. And in our certain story and our case, it really shaped the way that we share Khaliji art and our passion for it, and how we continue to highlight it through thinking of new and unorthodox ways to really get people to pay attention to it and generate more global interest in it. Thank you for listening to our story, and I urge you to check out our platform in your free time. Thank you.
Thank you, Manara and Sharifa, and thank you for highlighting that undeniable link between personal expression and achievements within the arts and creative sector. Next, we would like to welcome on stage artist Victor Sitali, and we invite you to read along with Victor. Thank you, Victor. And now joining us virtually, please welcome Elmira Fikrani, designer, co-founder of Plépah, Footloose initiative. Following Elmira will be Gamia Dewangamanik, design researcher.
Good afternoon and good evening, everyone. It is such a pleasure for me to participate in this event And this particular session really resonates with the work that me and my colleague have been undertaking for the past few months. Next slide, please. So my name is Gamia, and I'm here presenting with Almira. We are from Footloose Initiative, which is a collective of designers and researchers based in Indonesia. Today, we are going to share some aspects of our ongoing research project on community-driven innovation, or we shorten it to CDI. This project is supported by the Indonesian Ministry of Tourism and Creative Economy. And to begin with, I would like to share a brief introduction video that gives an overview of our project. Next slide, please. Okay, next slide, please. So our project's inquiry in community-driven innovation was triggered by the growing interest in developing an approach for an inclusive innovation model within the Sustainable Development Agenda, especially with the emergence of the creative economy sector into the development discourse. We feel that it is increasingly relevant to interrogate what inclusive innovation actually entails, especially given that innovation processes are understood and carried out differently in various sociocultural settings. Existing studies on the role of innovation in the development sector have mostly focused on the proliferation of formal and professionalized forms of innovation. And we feel like there has been little discussion about the inclusion of the other types of innovation, particularly those operating in the margins, such as in the rural areas or the ones that are happening in the informal sector, which tends to be community-led and hidden in plain sight. And while both formal and informal sectors play an essential role in tackling developmental challenges, they cannot be analyzed and scaled in the same way. Next slide, please. So in this context, inclusion refers to acknowledging the potential of unrecognized forms of innovation practice and engaging with diverse groups as the actors of innovation and positioning those to play a more active role in the development agenda. The scope of this CDI project highlights those other types of innovation that are exemplified through forms of grassroots activism, craft and vernacular practices, and community-based social enterprise. The reason why we do this project is because much of the knowledge possessed by these practices are often tacit and experiential. We're focusing on this subject to understand the complexity of various sociocultural issues that drive such community-based innovation and to inspire an agenda that situates the community's living context and their experiential knowledge at the forefront. Next slide, please. One of the key characteristics of the innovation landscape in Indonesia is how central the role of community is in its creation and development. And this is not a pattern that recently emerged. These place-based actions and culturally rich practices in community-based innovation have existed and developed for decades. Their creative practice aligned with various pressing developmental challenges from youth and women empowerment, poverty alleviation, waste management, and so forth. We are also astonished by these communities' collective capacity to bounce back and adapt in adversity. And this is especially evident during the pandemic. And now I would like to invite Almira to share more about this.
Thank you so much, Gamia. Next, please. We gathered insights from 21 practices and communities. The following are some of the emerging themes related to community resilience in the wake of the pandemic. The first theme is sociocultural resilience. These practices emphasize the importance of reconnecting, strengthening, and mobilizing shared assets to sustain communities and individual livelihoods by strengthening their capacity to adapt with contemporary challenges. These refer to both tangible and intangible assets. This is especially true for Spatokimin and Sanggar Santangan in Sengkawang. The pandemic has impacted the economic opportunities for the villages' communities. They responded by reconnecting with their natural assets, utilizing locally abundant materials to produce craft products. They also use their creative practice as a collaborative learning platform, especially for the young people in the area. For Forkani in Wakatobi and Pasir Putih Lombok, since the pandemic, local concerns towards food security have significantly increased. They responded through mobilizing their communities by using their local indigenous knowledge in cultivating the local agriculture systems, the local fishing industry, in order to become more self-sufficient. Next, please. The second emerging theme we saw is adaptive business for resilience. For several community-based tourism enterprises, such as ones in Mandalika, Lombok, and in Central Java, the pandemic became a time to reflect and focus more on quality tourism. They put emphasis on increasing the quality of service and consumers' experience instead of the pursuit of attracting a large number of visitors. Next, please. Another type of adaptive business can be seen in several community-based social enterprises such as Plépah. Their practice demonstrates agility in rethinking their strategies in business and product development during these uncertain times. Plépah enables value creation of underused agricultural waste by transforming them into biodegradable plates with the community and farmers in South Sumatra and Jambi. However, the pandemic halted any crowd gatherings such as festivals and weddings. But they saw a large market opportunity for takeaway food packaging. Therefore, they quickly developed food packaging and sold through using the digital marketplace, which brings us to resilience through hybrid new approach and a new way of collaborating. Next, please. Lilfenun and other craft-based enterprises harness technology and digital platforms to enhance relationship with their market as well as their communities they are working with. Lilfenun Enterprise created a product development process through digital collaboration with textile artisans in rural areas, thus allowing them to still create online training modules to build communities and artisans' capacity, as well as increase their digital literacy. As you can see through these examples, the communities are very much action-oriented. They continuously explore new and tangible approaches, as well as exploring various economic means to sustain and scale up their impact on their communities, especially during pandemic. Next, I will return once again, pass over to Gamia to sum up our research.
Next slide, please. So more than ever, the pandemic has prompted us to place more significance on community well-being, connectivity, and collective resilience. What this research project tries to achieve is to collect narratives and evidence of community-driven innovation practice as an alternative pathway towards a more inclusive development process. These CDI practices provide insights on a broader account of a more distributed and locally embedded innovation. These practices encompass the ingenuity of fluid, locally situated and adapted knowledge that demonstrates a greater degree of resourcefulness and self-sufficiency, and also demonstrates localized response to the community's shifting social and environment. We believe that it is important to find ways to articulate these diverse narratives and experiential knowledge to inform policies and developmental plans. Innovation, when collaboratively developed for, by, and with the communities themselves, can serve to build and sustain resilient futures. Next, please. So that's the end of our presentation. Thank you all for listening. And we would also love to learn more about community-based practices from across the globe. So please do get in touch with us and connect with us through our online platform and communityinnovation.id. Thank you very much.